Okay, so we're back with lesson 1, part 2. So we've kind of set up things for the course, and now we want to start having a look at PHP and our technology stack. So here's what we're going to do, and we're going to use the breakout feature in WebEx. So I've put everybody into a group, which you can find your group number in D2L under Other Tools and Groups. So you'll be working in the same group all semester. And this would be so when we do class activities with a group, so if you go into Other Tools and Groups, and you go to Breakout Groups, D2L should show you which group you are in. So there are 8 groups. There's 42 students in the class. So most groups have 5 students. Some groups have 6 students. So go ahead and find the group that you're in. If you have any issue finding your group, just let me know in the chat. And in a minute, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. I'm going to turn on the breakout room. So I'm going to split our session into 8 breakout rooms. And I want you to go into the room that matches your group number. Okay, so if you're in group 2, and you're one of the people in group 2, then please enter the breakout session 2. And in your breakout session, you can either use the chat, but probably maybe easier if you use your mic. And I've given you a few questions here that you can find on D2L. Why use PHP? Okay, Megan, I'll answer that in just a second. What are some of the rules in terms of the syntax? What are some websites that use PHP? How does it work? And is it strongly typed or loosely typed? And what's the difference? I'll show you. So I want you to come up with answers as a group. And there's a link. So this will link to discussion in the forum. Thanks for that, Ivan. Okay, so each group, so make a reply in here, just one per group, with what you found out in kind of your preliminary research. Okay, so again, go to Other Tools and Groups. You can identify which breakout group number you're in. I'm going to create breakout sessions. And then in your group, you're going to answer some of these questions and make a reply to this thread on the discussion board where it says reply here. Okay, and I will pop in and out of the different breakout rooms. You can always send me a message or ask a question. I'll also pause the recording for 10 minutes. And then we'll reconvene in 10 minutes and kind of have a look at what each group found out. Okay, are there any questions before I start the breakouts? Okay, Luke, which page specifically isn't working? The forum thread here isn't working? Okay, I will make sure the link is right. Hang on. Do you want to try the link again? Let me know. Should be updated now.
Sir, it says not authorized to view this page.
Not authorized.
For me.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I'll have to figure out why you can't get in there. Let me see. Winter 21. Okay, I'm in the right course. Says it's visible and there are no restrictions. Okay, I will figure out the forum link. And yeah, I'm going to start the breakout rooms and then you just join the breakout room that matches your group number. Okay, Jack? So find your group number under other tools and groups. If you're in group 5, you join breakout room 5. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so you can go to it manually. I'll have to figure out why. Thanks, Megan. So if you just go to discussions, you can find our recording. Just drag this over here. So we've got one posting from group 4. All right, great. So let's have a look. The other groups, if you can also post your findings here as well. Okay, so group 4 said, not that I'll read this all to you, you can read it yourself, but I'll kind of highlight the important points. We're going to type a lot of these tags. So wherever we've got PHP script, we're going to need an opening and a closing tag. Without those tags, our server's not going to interpret that that is PHP. All our files have a PHP extension. It's case sensitive, so that's important. You create a variable called name with a capital N. We can create a second variable, all in lowercase, also called name. PHP will consider those two separate things. Okay, Yahoo and Facebook, yep. And it is loosely typed, so we do not have to define variables. That's true. Roshan, I apologize. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, don't worry about that for today. Sorry, this isn't for marks. So if I put you in the wrong breakout session, no problem. Doesn't affect anything. Okay, not to worry. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so group 1. Yeah, that's important. So it's embedded into HTML. And it's C-based. So syntactically, we're going to see the same kinds of things you'd see in a language like C or Java. So curly braces, semicolons, etc. Okay. It is very flexible, absolutely. It's free. We've got our PHP tags. Yeah, echo. So there's no print. There isn't a print command. We use echo. Our comments are Java style as well. PHP variables have a $sign in front of them. Okay, that's great, Sammy. And yeah, it's really popular. So we can build it. We're going to use it for interactive, for dynamic websites. Okay. It's loosely typed, meaning when we create a variable, we don't have to say what type of data it is. So this is unlike in Java. So we can create a variable, we could give it a numeric value, and then we could reassign that variable and assign it a string value. We wouldn't be able to do that in a language like Java. Right? So it means we get fewer errors, but it also means harder to debug because it's not so well structured. Yeah, so it can make speed, but things aren't as clear. All right, great answers. Thanks. And let's see what group 5 had to say. So Mason, thanks for posting for your group. Yeah, we have lots of controls. Again, you mentioned the tags and that it's case sensitive, and we're using semicolons. Yeah, so the idea, and we'll kind of look at this a bit more next. So how PHP works with HTML. Right? So our HTML is the presentation. It's what gets sent to the browser. But our HTML is dumb. It doesn't have actual functionality. So if we want to be able to query data from a database or capture data from users or perform logic like a login, we need PHP because HTML doesn't have the ability to do any of this stuff. And Group 5 also mentioned that it's loosely typed, which is important to note. Okay, and we'll just take a quick look at the other groups. Thanks, Xavier, for posted. Yep, it's free. You've mentioned some of the other syntax rules we've already talked about. It works on a server, so this is really important, and this is why we had to install the Xampp web server. You can't just open PHP files in your browser. They'll open, but the code won't actually run. The code, PHP code, has to be interpreted by a web server in order to execute. Okay, so we'll look at this in a minute. Thanks, Adam, for posting for your group. Yep, so our variables are prefixed with $signs. And loosely typed, so really this is around about variables, that variables do not have a data type being declared, is the important thing. Okay, those are some really good answers. I think you guys have hit on together. You've hit on the basics. So groups maybe 2 and 3 and 7 as well. I can see that Sammy's going to be posting for group 3, which is great. So we'll have some of these other kinds of discussions and activities where we'll use the breakout groups. Today's is not going to be marked, but some of these you will get a mark just for being in class and participating in the group. Okay, but we won't do that for today. So let's kind of look at how these pieces all run together. Okay, so a big part of the goal at the end of this class is to get you to see the websites you look at every day differently. Okay, you know, we may travel, we might see something like this, and we want to see this bridge not just from the perspective of a tourist, but you know, these people, these engineers, the architects, they're going to see it differently, right? We see this, but they can actually look at it and see what's happening under the hood. How's it put together, right? We might see this, whereas this guy, he actually sees this instead. Okay, right? We see this. A healthcare professional, they're going to see this instead. What's actually happening under the hood to power and coordinate everything that we see, right? We see things like websites like this every day. As web developers, we're going to start to see underneath, how is it put together and how do the pieces work? Okay. So in terms of HTML and your database course, who's your database teacher this term for relational database? Is it Mazir? For your COMP1006G course, who's the instructor? Oh, it's Darcy. Okay, right. So a lot of what you're doing in that class overlaps with what we're doing in this class. So in order to build a web application, here's typically how it works. We've got a client, so they're using, you know, a phone, a tablet, a computer. They're making requests to a web server. I want to see a web page. On the web server, there's an interpreter for PHP or some other kind of language that will typically interact with files, with database, and with the mail server, perform logic. Let's say we're trying to log into a site and send back a response. And then the web server just renders HTML. So our HTML is kind of our front end, our presentation, but all the heavy lifting is done by a server-side scripting language, in this case, PHP. Okay? So we've got a whole bunch of components that work together. The good news about this is these skills are used everywhere. Okay? And the even better news is most people think this is some kind of magic, that they can type something in a browser and get information they're looking for, or they can do things online. The truth is it's really not magic. All web applications kind of work the same way. They're really all just about data. It's about moving data between a database and a user's browser. Okay, so let's think about what kind of data we're talking about in a web application. So probably a number of you, some people probably wake up every morning and log into a social media account, whether it's Facebook or something else. If we could look in the Facebook database, it's really actually a very simple web application. It's just a window into the database. What kinds of information would be stored in the Facebook database if we could actually see the structure? What kinds of data is stored in Facebook? Right? Too much, but how's it organized? Yeah, profiles, that's one thing. What else is in there besides user profiles? Yep, the messages. Groups. Posts. That would probably be the biggest table in there. Yeah, the ads. Maybe that's the biggest table. The stories. Yep, the locations. And probably also all the media files. That's basically everything that's in Facebook. So all Facebook.com is just a web application that queries those different tables. It adds data when we make a new post or upload a new file or add a story. And then we're just running queries on the database. You know, your Facebook profile is nothing other than a database query that displays all of the content you've added about yourself. Right? So you guys, your list was pretty good. You basically listed virtually everything here. Also, I had likes. What about Amazon? Right? Probably the world's most valuable web application. Again, it's actually, it's big, but it's not that complicated. If we looked in Amazon's database, what kinds of data is stored on Amazon that we can view on their website? Yeah, your products, history. What else is in there? Yep, the stores, payments, prices. Yep, your address book. Profiles, accounts. What's the most important table for Amazon from a business perspective? Right? These are all the things we need as a customer, right? The orders table, right? All of those other things, the whole thing exists so that users will create records in the orders table and pay Amazon. Excuse me. So also we have things like categories, reviews, product images, but again, you got a lot of these things. We'll talk about one more. This is the first site I look at every day. I'm brushing my teeth, pull up my phone. I usually go to the Globe and Mail. What kind of data is in that database that we can interact with on globeandmail.com? Yeah, the articles, that's probably the primary content. Yeah, subscriptions. What's the Globe and Mail? It's a newspaper. Yep, the ads, their images. Right, so all this website actually is, if we go here, it's just an application. You have the videos. All the content comes from the database. Right? I want to read the paper. I want to comment on an article. I'm just interacting with the database. So we're going to use a language like PHP to perform that functionality. So yeah, you guys, again, have listed. So all these applications, yes, absolutely, Shazia, we're going to do that next week. So we're going to be working using PHP to interact with our MySQL database. We're going to be doing that all semester long, virtually. Today's pretty much the only class we're not going to be doing that. Because that's how we build dynamic websites. So I like to think about a web application. Yep, it will later in the semester when we do security. Kind of like a pub, you think about it. In both cases, if you go to a pub for drinks or restaurant, there's a whole bunch of different pieces that coordinate to get us what we want. So let's go through this analogy, right? So in a pub, we've got a bunch of drinks behind the bar. In a web application, there's a bunch of data in a database that we want to access. If we're on Facebook, it's things like news feed user profile. If we're on Amazon, we want to see products and reviews. If we're on the Globe and Mail, we maybe want to see articles, photos, and video. Okay. But in both cases, as an end user, there's no direct access to what we want, right? You can't go into the pub and walk behind the bar and start pouring yourself drinks. If you're on Facebook, we don't have direct access to go into the database and read whatever we want to read. Okay? So things are kind of firewalled. In the pub, the bar serves as a firewall. You can't go in and grab the drinks. We can't go in directly to a database and get what we want. So how do we get it? Right? In a pub, we've got a server. And in a web application, we need a server to listen to our request. Right? So we make a request typically by clicking on a link or clicking a button that typically tells the web server what it is we want to see. I click on Brandon's profile. That's telling the server, show me the information in the database about Brandon, for example. Okay. So we've got to transmit that request somehow. So in the pub, maybe your server comes to the table with a notepad and they write down what everybody wants. In a web application, we're using SQL. That's how we issue our instructions. That's what you're going to learn in your class with Darcy. How do we issue instructions to pull out certain things from the database? So for example, if I click on this article, it gives me all the information, the heading, the authors, the date, the related comments, the image, the content of the article. So there's under the scenes, here's all the comments. Behind the scenes, there's an SQL command that gets issued when I click this link and pull up this web address. So if things work properly, the information we're asking for gets returned. In the pub, we get our drinks. In our web application, we get a web page that shows us the information we asked for. So in the pub, you've got all these things. We've got a bar of drinks, we've got the tables and seating, the menu, the server, the bartender. All of these things kind of work together so we can go into a pub with our friends when it's safe to do so, and we can order a round of drinks. In a website, we have all these different components. They all work together. Each component has its own job. So last semester, you learned the basics of HTML and HTTP. And then this semester, we're learning the other stuff. You're learning how to set up a database, how to run instructions in that database using structured query language, and then how to use server-side scripting to connect our database and our HTML websites together. So our PHP, it sort of sits in the middle. It's like our brains, that's the messenger, going back and forth between our web browser and our database. So that's when I say all web applications, they kind of work together to do this. So we're not going to get into our database today, but we will next week. Okay. So let's create just one or two super simple PHP pages for today. Okay. So in order to run them, this is why we had to install our Xampp server. So I'm going to start up my Xampp control panel, and you can start yours. So I'll just search for Xampp. Brings up my control panel. Now it has a whole bunch of services. For today, the only service that I need is the Apache web server. So I'm just going to click Start beside it. And I've got two ports. The default port for Apache for HTTP is port 80. I had to change mine to port 800 because I have a different web server, a Microsoft web server running on port 80. But yours should say port 80 and then port 443. That's for secure connections using SSL. We'll talk about that later in the course. So I'm going to start my Xampp server, and then I'm going to open up my PHP code editor, my Phpstorm code editor. So I'm going to open up Phpstorm. You can use any code editor. You can use Visual Studio Code. I mean, you can even use Notepad if you want. I don't recommend it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and that folder has to go somewhere very specific in order for this to work. So I'll just close this project up. So follow along if you can. So I'm going to create a new project here. And it's important that I create it in a certain folder, otherwise our PHP code isn't going to run. Now it defaults here to my users directory. I don't want to save it here. I'll show you where we're going to save it in a minute. If I go to my Xampp control panel here and click on the Explorer button, it'll open up this folder. It opens up my Xampp folder, which is in the root of Windows. And in here, our public folder is this one. It's Xampp htdocs. So this is where we're going to have to create our PHP project in order for our web server to be able to serve the pages and have our PHP code run. So I'm going to create it in here in C Xampp htdocs. So I'm going to browse and choose Xampp. Okay, if you're on a Mac, good question. Okay, I am not a Mac user, but Taryn, thanks for letting me know. Okay, Xampp htdocs. We will find it. Our good old friend Stack Overflow. Thank you, Hannah. Go to the Xampp app, volumes, mount, and explore, and then it will show you. So inside, I'm going to choose Xampp and htdocs. And then in here, I'm going to call this Lamp Food. So what we're going to do in our weekly lessons, we're almost done for today, so don't panic. We'll get you out of here soon. We're going to make an app like a grocery a shopping list application. And each week in class, we're going to add new features onto it. So rather than building a whole bunch of little applications together, we're going to build one big one. And each week, we'll just evolve it. So I'm going to call it Lamp Food. You can call it whatever you want. So I'm going to make a new project inside of my Xampp htdocs, and I'll call it Lamp Food with no spaces and no capitals. So I'll click the Create button. So I'm going to create a really simple PHP page here. So to create a page in Phpstorm, I'll just right-click my folder, choose New PHP file, and I'll call it Server Info. So I'm not going to use any capitals or any spaces. It doesn't really matter what you call the file. It automatically gets the file extension PHP. Now I get this little HTML template here. I'm actually going to wipe that out for now. So we'll put on one line of PHP code. For starters, let's just try this. We'll try a simple echo command. That says our first PHP page, and it's inside of these opening and closing tags. So I'm just going to save that. So add this to your page, and then I want to try and load it in my browser. Just kind of shrink my browser here so you can still see the code. So to run this, here's what I do. I'm going to go to the URL localhost. Now for me, I've got to put in :800. You don't need this because your server doesn't run on port 800. And I'll call it lamp food server info.php. So because this file is in, yep, you can do that as well, Ivan. You should be able to create the folder in there as well, but that works too. Thanks for the suggestion. So you can see our echo command prints it out. If I view the source of the page, notice we don't see the PHP tags. We don't see the echo command. So the PHP script gets interpreted on the web server. It doesn't get sent to the browser. The only thing that gets sent to the browser is the HTML output. So our users can't see our server-side code. Now, one of the things you guys mentioned about the rules of PHP. Okay, so your link would be here. For you, it would be this: localhost lamp food server info. I'm just putting the link in the chat. So yours URL would be the same as mine, except I've got :800 because my lamp server runs on, my Apache server runs on port 800. Yours by default will run on port 80. Yeah, you don't include the :800 in yours. So you can try the link I put in the chat. It's the same link, but just take out the :800. Okay. Does your Xampp control panel say your server is running? $80 is the default. As long as it has 80 there, you don't need anything in the URL. Okay. If you're having an issue, we're almost done, but I'm happy to stick around a bit after 4 and try to help you debug it, Taryn, or anybody else who's having an issue. Okay, yeah, you may have to change your port. Depends what's running on your computer. Yeah, if you go to the config here in the Apache configuration, it should tell you the port you're running on. If you do a find for port. See, mine's running on 800. Yep, you can change it to any port number you like. Thanks, Lee. And then you just save this file. Yep, if it works for your IP address, that's fine as well. No problem. You could do it with 127.0.0.1. Same thing. Now, several of you mentioned in your research that we had to have a PHP extension. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this code, and we're going to try to run the same code in a file that has an HTML extension. So I'm going to click on New. This time I'm going to create an HTML file. We'll call it PHP in HTML. Doesn't really matter what the file is called, just give it an HTML extension. And now I'm going to paste the same PHP code in. So the only real difference is my new file has an HTML extension. My first file has a PHP extension. So I'll save that. So now I want to try my HTML file, PHP in HTML. So what do you think is going to happen when we try to run our PHP script in a file with an HTML extension? You think it'll be the same? You think it won't run? Sam? Okay, well, let's try it out. So when I load, right, you'll notice this code doesn't get interpreted. Without the PHP extension, the Apache web server, the PHP interpreter that's here, it just ignores it. So our code, we view the source. Also, our source code actually shows up in the browser, which is not safe or secure. So all our PHP pages, they've got to have the PHP extension. Not only does our code not run, but it could be visible to users in the browser. And we also said we need the web server to run it. So if I do this, I'll just go to my directory here for a minute. If I try and open my PHP file directly, let's say I open with if I try and open my file in my browser, so notice now I'm opening it but through the file path. So once again, my script won't run. Right? So it doesn't work. We can't open PHP files this way. The only way we can load them is through our web browser. It's got to be through a fully qualified URL. That's the only way, and with the PHP extension, that's the only way our code will actually execute. Okay, so you can't just open your files in your browser. We have to serve them through the web server in order for the PHP to execute. We're going to add one last line of code and we're going to call it a day. So under here, we're going to call the built-in PHP function and one of the reasons I like Phpstorm, it has code prompts. So if I start typing, it brings up a list of methods. So we'll call PHP info. And this is going to give us a whole bunch of information about both the server and our HTTP client. So just add this one line. This is the last line of code we're going to write. Pretty simple file, an echo command to PHP info. And now when I refresh it, we get all this data. Tells us what version of PHP we're running, our operating system, what port we're on, all of the modules that our Apache server has. It tells us the host and the local file path, our IP address, port. So a whole bunch of useful information. What type of requests we're running, what browser, the users in, etc. So this one little function gives us all of this output. But this is all HTML, right? If we view the source, we won't see this call. Okay. So we're really just creating this one simple page today just to get started. We'll wind up creating dozens of pages through the course, but that's all for today. So it's just after 4. So I want to wrap up for today. Just want to quickly go over your checklist for next week, please. So if your group hasn't yet posted in the discussion forum, if you could please post your notes here. Okay, great. So thanks, Austin, for posting for group 7. So if groups 2 and there's group 3 as well, great. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Adil, for posting. Great. Okay, so everyone's done that. So before next week, if you haven't introduced yourself in the forum, please do so. Make sure you've installed all the software. I think most people already have it. Please do your week 1 quiz. It's in the week 2 folder. It'll be open at 5 p.m. today, and it's not due until next Monday at 5. Okay. And lastly, if in your browser, you can go into your WebEx profile and add a photo of yourself again, just to be nice to get to know who you are. So that if I actually see you in person, or we're lucky enough to be in class together next September, first day of class, be nice to be able to recognize you and know who you are. Okay. So that's it. So the only thing for next week is do the quiz and update your WebEx avatar. I will stick around in the WebEx room for a little bit in case anybody has questions or had any problems with the little bit we did today. Other than that, have a great week, and I will see you all next Tuesday.